I opened the door, expecting condolences. Instead, I found a notary holding a clipboard, my daughter-in-law standing beside him, and my own son staring at the floor like a guilty child. The pen was already uncapped, the paper was already flagged, and my husband's name was already printed at the bottom. Frank scheduled this last week, she said calmly. He wanted everything finalised quickly. Frank had been dead for 8 days. For a moment, I could not breathe, not because of grief, because I understood exactly what was happening, and it was happening inside my own kitchen. The notary smiled politely, the way people do when they think they are being professional. My daughter-in-law stepped forward and slid the papers onto the counter, right next to my unpaid electric bill and the mug of coffee I had forgotten to drink. "It's just a formality. Diane," she said, "you don't even need to read it. Ethan and I will take care of everything." I looked at my son. He did not look back. That was the moment I realised my mourning period was over. I was no longer a widow being comforted. I was a woman being processed. Before I go any further, I need to say this clearly. This story has been collected, rewritten, and carefully shaped from real experiences. Some details have been adjusted to protect privacy and to bring out the educational value and emotional truth of what happened. All images you see are created by AI to help you feel the weight of the moment, not to replace reality. If this kind of story is not for you, it is completely okay to step away, rest early, and take care of yourself. But if something here feels familiar, or if you want to understand how quiet manipulation can happen inside a family, stay with me. And if you do stay, leave a comment. I read them, and I gather these stories so none of us feel alone. Now, let me take you back to that kitchen. The notary cleared his throat and pointed to a highlighted section. "This confirms the transfer," he said. "Your husband initiated the update." I leaned closer and read the first paragraph, then the second. Then my eyes stopped. Her name was there, not as a witness, not as a temporary executor, but placed where ownership quietly changes hands. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I need to see the original," I said. "The one from Frank's attorney? Not this copy." My daughter-in-law did not miss a beat. "This is the original." She said, "You're just overwhelmed right now." That word again, overwhelmed. It is a word people use when they want to take something from you without asking. I looked at the date, the signature, the ink. I had lived with Frank for 41 years. I knew his handwriting better than my own. This looked close. Close enough to fool someone who wanted to believe it. But it was not right. Frank always crossed his T the same way, and this signature did not. I did not say it out loud yet. I just let my eyes stay on that page a second longer than was polite, because when you have been married for decades, you know the small things, you know the way he signed a birthday card, you know the way he wrote the word love, you know the pressure of his pen when he was tired. And this signature felt like someone had practiced it, close, but hungry. My stomach turned, but my voice stayed calm. I learned a long time ago that panic makes you easy to steer. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I went quiet and I started counting details. Who brought the notary? Who brought the pen? Who spoke first? Who avoided my eyes? If you have ever been in a moment like that, tell me in the comments. Do you confront immediately, or do you freeze and observe? Just write one word. Confront or observe. Ethan shifted his weight. "Mum," he said softly, "we talked about this. Dad didn't want you dealing with paperwork right now." I stared at him, at the boy I raised to tell the truth, even when his voice shook. "So you thought bringing strangers into my house while I'm still wearing black was a good idea?" I said, The notary stepped back, suddenly uncomfortable. "I can reschedule," he offered. My daughter-in-law smiled at him, tight and controlled. "No need, we'll handle it." That was when I noticed something else. She had brought her own pen. People do not bring pens to moments they expect to be questioned. She tapped it lightly against the counter, right where Frank used to leave his keys. "Just sign," she said. "You can rest after." Rest, as if this was a kindness. I felt the grief surge then, sharp and disorienting. Frank should have been standing behind me, making a joke about bad timing. Instead, I was alone in a room full of people who had already decided I was finished. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Her smile flickered. "Just for a second," Ethan exhaled loudly, frustrated. "Mum, why are you making this harder than it needs to be?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked one simple question. "Why does this say ownership?" I asked, tapping the page instead of administrative access. No one answered. The notary looked at my daughter-in-law. She looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at the floor. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. "I need copies," I said, "and I need the contact information for the attorney who prepared this." My daughter-in-law straightened. "Frank trusted me," she said. "He knew I would protect this family." I thought of Frank's last week, how quiet he had been, how he had double-checked locks, how he had written phone numbers on scrap paper and tucked them into odd places. A memory surfaced then, a small envelope in the kitchen drawer, behind the spices, written in Frank's careful handwriting for Diane. My heart began to pound. "I'll call you," I said to the notary. "Today is not appropriate." He nodded, relieved, and left quickly. The door closed. The house went still. My daughter-in-law turned to me, her voice suddenly sharp. "You're going to regret this," she said. Ethan finally looked up. "Mum," he said again, "please don't turn this into a fight." I looked at both of them and realized something that hurt more than the loss of my husband. They had already decided who I was in this story. Confused, in the way, temporary. They left soon after, whispering to each other in the driveway. I locked the door. Then I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the place where Frank's name had almost erased me. I opened the drawer, I found the envelope, and as I held it in my hands, one thought would not leave me. If my husband scheduled that appointment to protect me, why was the woman who betrayed him the one trying to collect the reward? And if she was this bold on day 8, what exactly had she already planned for day 9? I did not open Frank's envelope right away. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time after they left, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock over the stove tick like it always had. Those ordinary sounds felt louder than they ever had before, like the house was reminding me that life kept moving whether I was ready or not. I slid the envelope back into the drawer behind the spices, not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because some truths need the right moment, and I knew if I opened it then, I would either break down or confront someone too soon. Instead, I made myself to do something simple. I washed the coffee mug. That sounds small, but when you lose someone, even the smallest routines feel like decisions you have to earn. Frank used to tease me for rinsing the cup before putting it in the sink. He said it was pointless. I did it anyway. That morning, I did it for him. As I wiped the counter, memories began lining up in my head, not dramatic ones, ordinary ones, the kind you only question after it is too late. Melissa had not always felt like a threat. When Ethan first brought her home, she was polite in a careful way. Compliments about my cooking, questions about our family photos. She called me Diane at first, then switched to Mom without asking. I noticed it, but I let it go. I told myself that families grow by making room. Frank liked her. That mattered to me. She laughed at his stories, even the ones he told too slowly. She asked him for advice about money, about work, about buying furniture. I thought she respected him. Looking back, I realized she was studying him. There were small things that did not sit right, but none of them were enough to accuse someone of anything. A bill that came later than usual, a bank envelope she offered to take upstairs for me, a comment here and there about how hard it was for Ethan to manage finances. I brushed it off. I was raised to believe that suspicion without proof is unkind. Frank, however, began to change. It was subtle, the kind of change you only notice in hindsight, not in a dramatic way. No confusion, no anger, just a quiet shift. He double-checked doors at night. He asked me where we kept old paperwork. He wrote phone numbers on scrap paper and folded them carefully, like he did not want anyone else to see. One evening, while I was folding laundry, he asked me if I trusted our attorney. I laughed and said, of course. We had worked with the same woman for years. He nodded and said nothing else. At the time, I thought he was thinking about retirement, about getting older. People ask strange questions when they feel time moving faster than they want. Now, I know better. The day before he died, Frank asked me where the spice drawer key was. I told him it had not been locked in years. He smiled and said that was good. That is how Frank was. He never explained himself unless he thought it would help. He hated worrying me. I used to think that was kindness. Now I see it was also protection. The memory of Melissa standing in my kitchen with that pen brought me back to the present. Her confidence had not come from nowhere. Confidence like that is rehearsed. That afternoon, Ethan called. He sounded tired, not grieving, annoyed. Mum, he said, Melissa is just trying to help. You have been through a lot. I told him I understood that, and I did. I understood that grief makes people uncomfortable and they rush to clean it up. What I did not understand was why helping required my signature. I asked him if he had read the papers. He paused. She explained them to me. He said that pause told me everything. After we hung up, I sat down at the kitchen table and forced myself to slow down. Panic makes mistakes. Frank had taught me that. You do not move until you understand the ground under your feet. I opened drawers. Carefully, quietly, like someone who finally accepts that something precious has been hidden in plain sight. That is when I found the copies. Not full documents, just pieces, a title company brochure, a handwritten note with a phone number and the word Naomi, a calendar square circled in red from the week before Frank died. He had been preparing, and he had not told me because he knew exactly who would be listening. I remembered a moment from months earlier, Melissa standing in the doorway while Frank paid bills, asking casual questions, who handles what, where things are kept, laughing it off like curiosity. At the time, it felt harmless. Now it felt like a map. That is what scared me the most, not the big things, the little questions that sounded harmless at the time. Where do you keep the insurance paperwork? Who is on the deed? Do you still have the old will? She asked the way people ask about recipes. Smiling like she was trying to learn, I used to answer without thinking, because that is what mothers do. We share, we smooth, we make it easy. But looking back, I can see it clearly. She was not learning, she was collecting, and Frank must have realized it before I did. That is why he started hiding scraps of information like breadcrumbs for me. If you are listening and you have ever had someone in your family ask too many financial questions, I want you to answer this. Is it curiosity or is it inventory? comment curiosity or inventory. Sometimes naming it is the first step in protecting yourself. I did not cry then. That came later. What I felt in that moment was something colder and steadier. Clarity. If Melissa thought I was confused, she had underestimated grief. Grief does not make you stupid. It makes you careful. I put everything back where I found it. I locked nothing. I changed nothing. People reveal more when they think they are winning. If you are still here, just type still here so I know I am not alone. That evening I made myself dinner, toast and soup. I ate at the table Frank used to sit at. I talked to him out loud, just a little. I told him I had noticed. I told him I would take my time. And then my phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Patel next door. Diane, she wrote, I am not sure if this matters, but my door camera caught something strange the night Frank passed. If you want to see it, let me know. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Sometimes the truth does not crash into you. Sometimes it taps on your shoulder and waits before I tell you what Mrs. Patel saw. Let me pause for just a second. If you find yourself listening to stories like this often, consider subscribing to the channel. Not because of me, but because stories like these remind us to stay aware and protect ourselves. And please take care of yourself too. If you are listening right now, let me know in the comments what time it is for you and where you are listening from. I always wonder how far these stories travel. Now tell me this, if you discovered that the person trying to take your home had been planning longer than you ever imagined, would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay quiet and gather everything first? I went to see Mrs. Patel the next morning. I did not tell anyone where I was going, not Ethan, not Melissa. Grief gives you privacy. People assume you are wandering through memories. I let them assume. Mrs. Patel opened the door with that careful kindness neighbours use when they know something is wrong but do not want to intrude. She handed me a cup of tea before I even sat down. I do not want to upset you, she said, but I would rather you know. She turned her tablet toward me. What the camera showed was not dramatic. That was the unsettling part. No shouting, no running, just quiet movement. Kyle's car pulled up across the street the night Frank died. The timestamp was clear. He got out, looked around, and walked toward my house. He stayed for less than 20 minutes. Then he left. Frank was already gone by then. I sat very still, watching the clip again and again. Did you tell anyone else? I asked. Mrs. Patel shook her head. I did not know if it was my place. I thanked her and left with the image burned into my mind. On the drive home, I did something I had not done in years. I turned off the radio. No music, no noise, just me and the sound of my turn signal clicking like a metronome. I replayed the last month in my head the way you replay a conversation after someone insults you, except this time it was not an insult. It was a threat. Frank double-checking locks, Frank asking about our attorney, Frank tucking phone numbers into drawers. He'd been building a quiet emergency plan, and I had mistaken it for aging. That thought hit me so hard I had to pull into a parking lot for a minute and breathe, because grief is one kind of pain, regret is another. If you have ever ignored a warning sign because life was busy, you are not alone. Tell me in the comments, what is one small sign you wish you had taken seriously sooner? Just one. We learn from each other here. Kyle had no reason to be there. Ethan was not home that night. And Melissa had told me she was alone. That was the first time I felt something close to anger rise above the grief. Not the kind that makes you shout, the kind that makes you focused. Later that day, another memory surfaced, one I had ignored because it felt inconvenient. weeks before Frank died. He'd come home early from his walk. He looked shaken. He said he thought he heard voices in the garage. When he checked, no one was there. I'd told him it was probably nothing. Now I wondered if it had been Kyle. I did not confront Melissa. Not yet. Instead, I watched her. That afternoon, she stopped by with groceries. She set them on the counter like she still belonged there, like nothing had changed. She talked too much about errands, about Ethan being stressed, about how hard it was to lose Frank. She did not mention the notary. She did not mention the papers. She did not mention Kyle. People who are innocent do not avoid subjects so carefully. While she talked, I noticed her phone. She kept it face down. She checked it often. She flinched when it buzzed. I asked her how she had been sleeping. She said fine. Then she added, too quickly, Kyle has been helping me with some things. She caught herself immediately. Kyle, I said calmly, why would Kyle be helping you? Her face changed, just a little, enough that I knew I had stepped on something important. He's just a friend, she said. He stopped by once to check on me. Once. The word hung in the air. That evening, Frank's memory came back to me in pieces. The way he had insisted on handling his own bills, the way he had asked about our attorney, the envelope in the drawer. Frank had not been paranoid. He had been observant, and someone had noticed that. I went to bed early that night, but I did not sleep. Around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Mum, Melissa is worried about you. She says you seem confused and overwhelmed. Maybe we should talk about getting you some help. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Help. That word again. I typed back slowly. I told him I was fine. I told him I needed time. I told him I loved him. He did not respond. The next morning, I opened the envelope Frank had left for me. Inside was not a confession or a will, just instructions. Practical. Frank had always been practical. Names, dates, a note telling me not to sign anything until I spoke to Naomi, a reminder that grief makes people rush at the bottom in his handwriting. One line stood out, if someone pushes you, it means they are afraid of time. I folded the paper and put it back. Then I did something Frank would have appreciated. I made a list, who benefits if I sign, who loses if I wait, who has been asking questions. Melissa's name appeared on every line. That afternoon, she came back again, this time without groceries. She walked straight to the table and placed a folder down. I know yesterday was bad timing. She said, but this really needs to be handled. I did not open the folder. I spoke to a friend. She continued, someone who works with seniors. They said stress can affect decision-making. There it was, the beginning of a story where I was no longer reliable. I am not signing anything, I said, and I am not discussing my health with you. Her jaw tightened. Ethan thinks this is best, she said. I stood up then, slowly, carefully. Ethan does not get to decide that. I said, for the first time. She raised her voice. Just a little. You are making this harder than it has to be. I looked at her and realized she believed this was already over. After she left, I locked the door. Then I unlocked it again. I did not want her thinking anything had changed, because nothing had, not yet. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with Frank's note beside me, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Ethan. It was a message from an unfamiliar number. It said, we need to talk about that night. Kyle told me things you should know. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, because whoever sent that message knew something, and the next truth was already on its way. I did not reply to that message right away. I set my phone down on the table and stared at it like it might move on its own. Whoever had sent it knew about Kyle. They knew about that night, and they knew how to reach me without going through Ethan or Melissa. That alone told me this was no coincidence. Instead of answering, I went outside and sat on the back steps. The morning air was cool, the kind Frank liked. He used to say it cleared his head. I tried to breathe the way he did, slow and steady, like nothing bad had ever happened in this house. The funeral was later that day. People talk about funerals like they are about closure, but funerals are also where liars practice their best faces. They are performances. Everyone says what they think they are supposed to say. Everyone watches everyone else. Melissa arrived dressed perfectly. Black dress, simple makeup. She cried at the right moments. She held Ethan's arm just tightly enough to look fragile. I watched her from across the room. She greeted people I barely knew and accepted sympathy like she was collecting something. Each hug, each nod, each quiet thank you. When it was her turn to stand near the casket, she leaned in a little too close. "I promise I'll take care of everything," she whispered. I heard it. I do not think she meant for me to. After the service, while people lingered and talked about food and weather, Melissa drifted back toward me. Not directly. She circled, like she wanted witnesses nearby. "I was thinking," she said softly, "we should go over the house paperwork soon, just to make sure nothing gets lost." I stared at her. Frank's body was still in the building. "I am not discussing paperwork today," I said. Her mouth tightened. "Just a fraction. I just want to help," she replied. Frank trusted me. That sentence landed wrong. Frank trusted very few people with money, and Melissa had never been one of them. That night, after everyone left, I came home to a house that felt too quiet. I wandered from room to room, touching things I did not need to touch. The back of the couch, the light switch by the hallway, Frank's shoes by the door. Grief does strange things to time. Hours passed without me noticing. Around midnight, I picked up my phone again and reread the message. "We need to talk about that night." I typed back one word. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "A friend of Kyle's. He said things he should not have." I did not realize what they meant until I saw the news about your husband. My stomach turned. "Where? Tomorrow. Somewhere public." I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. The next morning, Melissa called me early. "I'm worried about you." She said, "You didn't answer Ethan last night." I told her I had gone to bed early. She paused. "You know, stress can do things to people." She said, "Maybe we should have someone check on you." There it was again, the careful planting of doubt. "I am fine." I said, "Please stop suggesting otherwise." She sighed like I was being difficult. "You don't have to push everyone away," she said. After we hung up, I noticed something small but unsettling. My spare house key was no longer on the hook by the door. I stood there staring at the empty hook longer than I should have. I knew who had taken it, and I knew why. That afternoon, I met the man who had texted me at a quiet coffee shop near the highway. He looked nervous, kept glancing at the door. He told me Kyle had been frantic the week before Frank died, talking about money, about needing something to come through fast, about Melissa promising him that once the house situation was handled, things would be easier. "What house situation?" I asked. He shrugged. "I did not ask. I just know Kyle said everything depended on it." I asked him why Kyle had gone to my house that night. The man hesitated, then said, "Kyle said Melissa asked him to stop by. She said Frank had found out and things had gone bad." I felt cold. "Did he say what happened inside?" I asked. The man shook his head, just that he left fast. He said it scared him. When I got home, I found Melissa's car in my driveway. She was inside my house, going through a box of Frank's papers. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment before she noticed me. "Oh," she said. "I was just organising things." I pointed at the box. "Put it down." She straightened. "Ethan told me to help. Ethan does not live here." I said. She laughed lightly, like I was being dramatic. "You're exhausted. You probably do not remember giving me the spare key." I walked past her and opened the drawer behind the spices. The envelope was still there, untouched. I turned back to her. "You need to leave," I said. She did not move. Instead, she said something that finally made her intentions clear. "We can do this the easy way," she said, "or we can involve people who decide these things for you." I looked at her and understood exactly what she meant. Guardianship, control, paperwork that erases you quietly. She left after that, frustrated but confident she had time. That night, I sat alone in the dark and replayed everything: the notary, the missing key, Kyle at my house, the way Melissa kept pushing urgency. Frank had been right. Time was what she was afraid of. And now that I understood that, I knew my next move could not be emotional. It had to be precise. Because if she was already talking about deciding things for me, then the next step was no longer about my house. It was about my freedom. The knock on my door came 3 days later. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm enough to sound official. I knew before I opened it what this was going to be. 2 women stood on my porch. One held a clipboard. The other wore the kind of calm smile people practice when they believe they are being helpful. They introduced themselves as Adult Protective Services, doing a wellness check. Mrs. Carter, the one with the clipboard, said, "We are here for a wellness check." There it was. Melissa had finally made her move. "Quick question. If this happened to you, would you call a lawyer first or call your family first?" Comment lawyer or family. I stepped aside and let them in. My house was clean, not staged, just lived in. Frank's slippers were still by the couch. The mail sat neatly stacked. Nothing about my life looked out of control. They sat at my kitchen table while I poured coffee. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. They asked gentle questions. How was I sleeping? Was I eating regularly? Did I feel safe living alone? I answered calmly, truthfully. Then came the part Melissa had been counting on. "Do you have support?" one of them asked. "Family who helps you with finances or decisions?" I smiled. "I have a son," I said, "and I have an attorney." That caught their attention. I showed them my medical records, my prescription list, my calendar with appointments written in my own handwriting. I even joked that my biggest problem was forgetting where I left my reading glasses. They laughed. People relax when you laugh with them. After 20 minutes, they stood to leave. "You seem very capable," the woman said. "If anything changes, don't hesitate to reach out." I thanked them and closed the door. Then I leaned against it and let myself breathe. Melissa had failed, but she would not stop. An hour later, Ethan called. "Mum," he said, already tired. "Why did Adult Protective Services come by?" I told him I had no idea who had called them. He hesitated. Melissa was just worried. "About what?" I asked. Silence. "She thinks you're not handling things well," he said finally. "She thinks you need help." That word again. Help. I wanted to ask him when helping turned into calling strangers to assess my life, but I did not. I reminded myself that Melissa was not just manipulating paperwork. She was working on people. I am fine. I said, and if you want updates about my health, you can ask me directly. He sighed. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I said quietly. Someone else already did. That evening, Melissa texted me, just checking in. Hope the visit went well. I did not respond. Instead, I did something she did not expect. I made copies of everything. Bills, bank statements, Frank's notes, the message from Kyle's friend, the timestamp from Mrs. Patel's camera. I put them in a folder and drove across town to Naomi's office. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. This is not about concern, she said. This is about control. Hearing it out loud was different. Cleaner, sharper. She is creating a narrative. Naomi continued. You are grieving. You are overwhelmed. You need someone else to step in. Once that story sticks, paperwork follows. I asked her what I should do. You slow everything down, she said, and you document everything. On my way home, I stopped at the hardware store. I bought new locks. I did not install them yet. That night, Melissa showed up again, this time with a box of food. I brought dinner, she said brightly. You must be exhausted. I let her inside. I wanted her comfortable. She set the box down and glanced around like she was taking inventory. Her eyes lingered on the file folder on the table. I talked to Ethan. She said, He's really worried, I'm sure, I replied. She lowered her voice. We should think about next steps, temporary arrangements, just until things settle. There are no arrangements. I said. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. You know, she said, sometimes families have to make hard decisions. I met her gaze. Families do not get to erase people. Her smile disappeared. You're being difficult, she snapped. Frank would not want this. That was when I stood up. Do not speak for my husband, I said. Ever again? She stared at me, then laughed softly. You really think you can handle this alone? She asked. Paperwork, lawyers, everything. Yes, I said. I do. She gathered her things and left without another word. I changed the locks the next morning. When Ethan found out, he was furious. Melissa said you locked her out. He accused. She does not live here. I replied. She's my wife. He said, and this is my home. I said, that afternoon, Naomi called me. Someone tried to start a guardianship case. She said it did not go anywhere yet, but it shows what she is attempting. My heart pounded. What did she try to file? I asked. Guardianship paperwork. Naomi said. Incomplete, rushed, sloppy. Melissa was running out of time. That night, I sat in Frank's chair and felt the weight of it all settle in. The grief, the betrayal, the realization that the danger was not loud or violent. It was polite, it was legal, it was wearing my family's face. And as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, one thought followed me into the dark. If Melissa was already willing to try and take away my independence, what was she willing to lie about next? After Melissa tried to file for guardianship, something inside me settled, not calmed, settled. Fear makes you rush, grief makes you ache, but clarity makes you methodical. And that was where I finally landed. The next morning, I woke up early, the way Frank used to. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the folder Naomi had helped me organise. Everything was labelled, dates, times, names, nothing emotional, just facts. I stopped reacting. That was the first real change. When Ethan called that day, I answered calmly. I did not defend myself. I did not explain. I simply said I was working with an attorney and asked him to direct any concerns there. He was quiet for a long moment. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I had to." Melissa did not come by anymore. Instead, she sent messages, polite, careful, each one framed as concern. "Just checking on you. Hope you are feeling stronger today. Let me know if you need help with anything." I saved every one of them. Naomi told me something important during our next meeting. When people are trying to take something quietly, she said, they get sloppy when they think they are losing. She was right. Within a week, Melissa made a mistake, a big one. She contacted a title company using my address. I only found out because Frank had signed up for paper mail notifications years ago, something he never turned off. The envelope arrived like any other, plain, unremarkable. Inside was a confirmation of inquiry regarding potential ownership update. My name was listed as current owner. Melissa's name appeared below it. I felt my heart beat harder, but my hands stayed steady. I called Naomi immediately. "She is trying to move fast." Naomi said, "Too fast?" "That helps us." She told me to do nothing. Let Melissa think she was ahead. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights off. I wanted the house to look empty from the outside. I wanted silence. Silence makes people underestimate you. Around 10, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. I thought maybe she had sensed the shift. Instead, she wrote something that made my stomach tighten. "Ethan is worried you are isolating yourself. We may need to talk about next steps." Next steps. She was escalating again. I did not respond. Instead, I did something Frank would have appreciated. I hired help, not a babysitter, not a caretaker, an investigator. Naomi recommended him. Quiet, discreet, the kind of man who listens more than he talks. His name was Grant. We met in his office. No small talk. I laid everything out, the camera footage, the texts, the timeline. "Kyle," Grant nodded and took notes. "People like this leave trails," he said. "They think they are smarter than everyone else." He asked me one question before I left. "Do you want the truth?" he said. "Or do you want leverage?" I answered honestly, "I want both." A few days later, Grant called. "Your daughter-in-law has been busy." He said, he told me Kyle was in trouble, real trouble. Debt, lawsuits, desperation. He told me Melissa had been moving money between accounts that were not hers to move. "She is not just panicking," he said. "She is planning." That explained everything. The urgency, the pressure, the narrative about my instability, the rush to paperwork. She was not trying to help. She was trying to survive. That night, Ethan showed up unannounced. He looked tired, older, torn in half. "She says you are shutting her out," he said. "She says you do not trust her." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit," I said. He sat. I slid one piece of paper across the table. Just one. The title inquiry. "I did not do this," I said. "Did you?" He stared at it. "No," he said slowly. "I did not even know about this." "Exactly," I replied. He rubbed his face with his hands. "She said it was paperwork Dad wanted started." She said it was nothing serious. I nodded. "She says a lot of things," I said, "and she says them when no one else is listening." He looked up at me then, really looked. "You think she's lying?" He said. "I know she is," I answered. He did not argue. That scared me more than if he had. When he left, he did not hug me, but he did not defend her either. That was progress. The next morning, Grant sent me a message. Kyle had been seen meeting with Melissa the night before, in a parking lot, late, nervous. And then Grant added one more line. "They are arguing now. People under pressure turn on each other. Frank used to say that stress reveals cracks. I began to understand the shape of what was coming. Melissa thought she was losing control of me. Kyle thought Melissa was his solution. Ethan was starting to see things he could not unsee. And I was no longer alone. That evening, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the street lights flicker on. For the first time since Frank died, I felt something like balance, not peace, readiness. Because when people realize they are cornered, they do one of two things. They disappear, or they make a mistake so big it finally shows everyone who they really are. And as I turned away from the window, my phone buzzed with a new message from Grant. She just contacted a notary again. This time, she is not being careful at all. The second notary attempt did not happen at my front door. It happened quietly. And that made it far more dangerous. Grant called me early that morning. His voice was low, controlled. She reached out to a mobile notary. He said, "Different one, different company." She told them you were grieving and needed help completing documents. I closed my eyes and let that sink in. Different notary meant she knew the first attempt had failed. It meant she was adjusting, learning, getting bolder. She is trying to catch you alone. Grant continued. She is telling people you asked for assistance. I thanked him and hung up. Then I did something Melissa would never expect from someone she believed was fragile. I went grocery shopping. I walked every aisle. I picked up bread Frank liked. I chatted with a cashier I had known for years. I made myself visible, normal, present. Predators prefer isolation. I refused to give her that. When I got home, I found the side door unlocked. I had replaced the front locks first, but I had not changed every door yet. I stood still for a long moment. I was certain I had locked it. I stepped inside slowly. Nothing looked disturbed at first. The couch cushions were straight. The mail was untouched. Then I noticed the hallway closet door was open. Inside, a small box was missing. Not the important files, not the obvious things. The box with Frank's old checkbooks, expired IDs, notes he never threw away, paper that could be used to build stories. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. She had crossed another line. I called Naomi. She is escalating, Naomi said, after I explained, "This is no longer just pressure. This is preparation. Preparation for what was the question? That afternoon, Grant sent me photos, blurry but clear enough. Melissa and Kyle arguing in a parking lot, her hands moving fast, his shoulders hunched. They were not united anymore. They were desperate. Then came the email, not to me, to Naomi, from the title company. They had received conflicting instructions regarding my property. Someone claiming to act on my behalf had submitted incomplete documentation and was asking about expedited processing. Naomi called me immediately. She is tripping over herself. She said, "That helps us." How? I asked. "Because mistakes leave trails," she replied. And she just left fingerprints everywhere. That night, Melissa texted me again. "I do not want this to turn into something ugly. We should talk." I stared at the screen. For the first time, I responded, "Tomorrow, at the house." Grant told me that was exactly the right move. People who think they are losing want to regain control. He said, "Give her the illusion that she can." The next afternoon, she arrived early, too early. I watched her from the living room window. She sat in her car for a moment, breathing, preparing. When she knocked, I opened the door calmly. She walked in and stopped short. The house felt different. The locks were new. The files were gone. The atmosphere was no longer permissive. "You changed the locks," she said. "Yes," I replied. She tried to laugh it off. "Ethan was upset about that." "I am sure," I said. She sat at the table without being invited. "I know things have been tense," she said, "but we both know Frank would not want lawyers and outsiders involved. I said nothing. She leaned forward. Kyle is leaving town. Things are changing. We should settle this. There it was. Kyle was running. That is interesting. I said, because he was just here the night Frank died. Her face drained of colour. You should not listen to rumours. She snapped. I listened to facts. I replied. She stood up abruptly. You are... Confused, she said, you are letting grief distort things. I reached into the drawer and placed one printed photo on the table. The camera still from Mrs. Patel's footage. Kyle at my house, time-stamped. She froze. Then she did something revealing. She reached for the photo. I pulled it back. That does not belong to you, I said. Her voice dropped. You do not understand what you are doing. Oh, I said softly, I understand perfectly. She paced. If you go down this road, you will lose your son. I held her gaze. If that is true, then I will lose him knowing I protected myself. That was the moment her control slipped. You think you are smart, she hissed. But paperwork decides these things, not feelings. I nodded. You are right. Then I slid another document across the table. The title, Inquiry, her name on it, the date, the request. Her mouth opened, closed. I can explain, she said. Please do. I replied. She did not. She grabbed her bag and left without another word. That evening, Ethan called. His voice was different. Mum, he said, I need to ask you something. I waited. Melissa says you accused her of something serious. He continued. She says you are being influenced by strangers. I told him to come over. When he arrived, I showed him everything, not all at once. Slowly, one piece at a time, the footage, the emails, the timeline. He did not interrupt. When I finished it, he sat in silence for a long time. She told me Kyle was helping with errands. He said, finally. She told me Dad trusted her with everything. I said nothing. I think she lied to me. He said, I nodded. I know she did. He put his head in his hands. That night, Grant called again. Melissa tried to access another account. He said, it was denied. Then he added something that made my chest tighten. She is panicking. The next move would not be subtle. People who panic do not plan carefully. They rush, they overreach, and they make mistakes that cannot be undone. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, one thought stayed with me. If Melissa was willing to lie to everyone she loved to save herself, what lie was she about to tell next to save everything? Naomi told me we needed one meeting on record, with everyone in the same room. She said if Melissa could still charm her way out, we would learn that too. That night I did not sleep much. I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad like a woman studying for an exam she never wanted to take. I wrote down the facts in plain language, because plain language is harder to twist. Notary attempt, title inquiry, Kyle on camera, missing key, Adult Protective Services visit, and under that list I wrote one sentence for myself. I am allowed to be sad and still be sharp. If you are listening right now, I want you to choose something with me. Would you rather be seen as nice or be safe? Comment nice or safe, because that choice is where a lot of women my age get trapped. We were trained to keep things pleasant. Even when something is wrong, I was done keeping it pleasant. The meeting did not happen in a courtroom. It happened in a small conference room with beige walls, bad coffee, and a long table that made everyone feel exposed. Naomi chose the place on purpose. Neutral ground, no home court advantage for anyone. Melissa arrived first. She sat stiffly, hands folded, eyes darting to the door every time it opened. She looked smaller than she had in my kitchen, less certain. Panic does that to people. It strips away performance. Ethan came next. He looked like he had not slept. He sat beside me without touching my arm. That distance hurt more than I expected, but I understood it. He was standing between two versions of his life, and neither one felt safe. When Naomi walked in, Melissa straightened. Naomi did not smile. She did not raise her voice. She simply laid a thin folder on the table and sat down. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "This will not take long if everyone is honest." Melissa laughed softly. "I have nothing to hide." Naomi opened the folder. "Then this will be easy." She began with the notary attempts, dates, names, inquiries, each one placed carefully on the table like puzzle pieces. Melissa shifted in her chair. Naomi moved on to the title company emails, the incomplete paperwork, the requests for expedited processing. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Melissa," he said quietly, "you told me this was nothing." Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it. Naomi slid the still image from Mrs. Patel's camera across the table. "Kyle at my house. Time-stamped. Clear." The room went very still. That image was captured the night Frank died. Naomi said, "Can you explain why your associate was present?" Melissa's face flushed. "He was checking on me," she said quickly. "I was scared. According to records," Naomi replied, "you told Diane you were alone." Melissa's voice rose. "This is being twisted." Naomi did not react. She placed one more document on the table. The attempted guardianship filing, incomplete, rushed, sloppy. This was submitted without Diane's consent. Naomi said, "And without medical justification." Ethan looked up sharply. "You said that was just a conversation." He said. Melissa finally lost control. "I was trying to protect us," she snapped. Everything was falling apart. Kyle was in trouble. I needed time. I said nothing. I let the silence work. Naomi closed the folder. "This is no longer a family disagreement," she said. "This is a pattern." Melissa stood up abruptly. "You cannot do this," she said. "You cannot take everything from me." Naomi met her gaze. "We are not taking anything. We are stopping you." Melissa turned to Ethan. "You are going to let them do this," she demanded. Ethan did not answer right away. He looked at the table, at the documents, at the image of Kyle. Then he looked at me. "You never wanted this fight," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I wanted the truth." His shoulders sagged. Melissa grabbed her bag. "You will regret this," she said. "Both of you." She left the room without another word. The door closed behind her. No one spoke for a moment. Then Ethan put his head in his hands. "I did not know." He said, "I swear I did not know." "I believe you." I said, and I did. Naomi stood. "There will be follow-up," she said. "But for now, she has been served with a formal notice through council. Any further action on her part will have consequences." Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of grey Frank used to complain about. Ethan walked me to my car. "She was always good at explaining things," he said, "at making them sound reasonable. That is how manipulation works." I replied, "It sounds like care until it costs you something." He nodded slowly. "I need time," he said. "I know," I said. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Not deeply, not peacefully, but without the constant tension in my chest. In the morning, my phone buzzed. It was Grant. "She is not done," he said, "but she is cornered." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the next move will be reckless." I thanked him and hung up. I walked into the kitchen and opened the window. The air felt different, lighter, but not safe yet. because people who lose control rarely accept it quietly, and somewhere out there, Melissa was deciding what story to tell next, one that could change everything. When everything finally went quiet, that was when the weight of it all truly landed. Not in the meeting room, not when Melissa walked out, not even when the paperwork stopped coming. It landed a few mornings later, when I stood alone in my kitchen and realised no one was trying to rush me anymore. No calls, no messages framed as concern, no pressure disguised as love, just silence. And for the first time since Frank died, that silence did not feel dangerous. It felt earned. I made coffee the way he liked it and sat at the table where so much of this had unfolded. I thought about how close I had come to losing not just my house, but my voice. How easily it could have happened if I had signed one paper on one bad day. That is the part people do not talk about enough. Most harm does not arrive screaming. It arrives smiling. It arrives with a pen already uncapped. Melissa did not get what she wanted. There were consequences, legal ones, social ones. Some things never returned to how they were, and that is the truth. My relationship with my son changed, slowly, carefully. It began to heal, but it will never be blind again, and maybe that is not a loss. I learnt something about love through all of this. Real love does not rush you. Real love does not need urgency. Real love does not ask you to disappear so someone else can feel safe. I also learnt something about myself. I am stronger at 63 than I ever was at 40. Not louder, not harder, just clearer. I used to believe being kind meant staying quiet. I used to believe keeping peace was my responsibility. I was wrong. Peace that requires your silence is not peace. It is surrender. There were nights I sat in the dark and talked to Frank out loud. I told him I wished I had seen things sooner. I told him I was sorry he carried that worry alone. And in those quiet moments, I realised something that still steadies me now. He trusted me to finish what he started, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. That is what saved me. Not luck, not timing. Truth, collected slowly, held carefully, used when it mattered. If you are listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, I want you to pause with me for a moment. Ask yourself a few honest questions. Has anyone ever rushed you when you were vulnerable? Has anyone framed control as care? Has anyone suggested you were confused when you were simply grieving or tired? If so, please hear this clearly. You are not weak for needing time. You are not difficult for asking questions. And you are not broken because you trusted someone who should have protected you. One of the hardest lessons I learned is that boundaries often disappoint the people who benefit from you having none. That does not make boundaries wrong. It makes them necessary. I changed more than my locks after this. I changed how I listened to my own instincts. I stopped explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped rushing to prove I was capable. Capability does not need witnesses. And here is something personal I want to share with you. There were moments during this ordeal when I wanted to give up, just to make the tension stop. Moments when signing that paper felt easier than standing alone. Moments when I questioned whether protecting myself was worth the cost. If you have ever been there, I want you to know something. Choosing yourself does not mean you lose everyone. It means you finally find out who stays. Life after this is quieter, slower, better. I take walks without checking my phone. I keep my paperwork organised. I talk openly with my son now, even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable. And I live in my home without fear, not because nothing bad could ever happen again, but because I trust myself to notice. If this story has stayed with you, I invite you to do something small but powerful, Like the video, subscribe to the channel, not for numbers, not for noise, but because stories like this remind us that awareness is a form of protection. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what time it is where you are. Tell me which part of this story felt closest to your own life. Your voice matters more than you think. Before I end, I want to leave you with one last question, one that Frank would have asked if someone asked you to give up your independence for their comfort. What would you say today that you might not have said before? Sit with that question, because the answer might just change everything.